Come on in, you guys. We got a brand new episode of Jimmy Rants in store for you here today. JimmyRants.com is the website. As always, if you want to engage live in the content, you do have to go follow me over on Instagram. I am at Livin' Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you are there, you can join just like Bish and Bonnie and Linda and all these great people coming in right now watching Jimmy Rants. Thank you guys for being here today. You can also watch, if you follow me on Facebook, we simulcast over here, so thank you guys for being here today as well. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay for up to 24 hours on Instagram, but after 24 hours, it does disappear. So you'll need to pop over to JimmyRants.com. That's where we archive all the past episodes. Or you can go to YouTube, type in the keyword Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. So if you missed my rant from earlier where I talked about the meat shortages, a lot of people have been asking questions about that and what I think is actually going on. Go watch the replay now. It's up on YouTube. Already got some good engagement in the YouTube comments. So thanks to everybody watching this on replay on YouTube. Thank you for watching all these videos too. Really good rant. But I have a bonus one for you here. And I've been teasing this one for a little while because a lot of people are hearing about COVID-19 and they're hearing about, oh, I wonder what happens in my body if I were to get this. And I did a rant yesterday all about people who have insulin resistance, blood sugar and insulin levels and inflammation levels that are a little bit wackadoodle. Perhaps your immunity and your ability to fight off COVID-19 is not as strong. Well, we're going to talk about the mechanism about how your immune system fights off viruses like COVID-19 in this Jimmy Rants today. This is from Vox.com. They have some good articles. The headline says, what immunity to COVID-19 might actually mean. How your body will try to save you from the new coronavirus. So I recently told you guys I went down about 2 miles from my house here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. There's a little blood clinic there that was testing for COVID-19 antibodies. And so they test for 2 specific antibodies. One of the antibodies is you have recently gotten it and it's in your system. And so your body is starting to fight it off. We're going to talk about the antibodies that get created by the immune system here in a second. The second one is if you had it at some point, we don't know how long ago, but generally you tend to hold on to antibodies for a little while after you've had a virus get fought off. And so that's the second antibody. Well, I tested for both antibodies and they came back negative for both, which means I likely have not had any exposure to COVID-19 being here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Of course, I've been holed up in my house. I literally only go out to go get food, and that's about it. Like, literally, that's the only reason I go out now. I did get a check from my publisher recently that had to deposit, and it was, I couldn't just do it over the little apps you can do on your phone. So I had to physically go to the bank. Of course, the bank's closed except for the drive-through, so I never got out and came in contact. So anyway, my exposure, very limited. And so what happens if you do get exposed to this? We're going to find out right now. The COVID-19 coronavirus meets its most formidable foe from the moment that it enters the human body. Your immune system is waiting, ready for action, and it determines who dies and who survives. It is why the vast majority of those who have been infected have recovered from the disease. Let's remember that. 98% of the people who have gotten COVID-19 have completely recovered. This is a fact that I don't think is underscored enough with all the focus on the deaths and all the focus on the number of cases. 98% of the people get better. Why? Because their immune system fought it off. Now, yeah, some people had major symptoms, others had a lot milder symptoms, and some had no symptoms. But the point is 98% of the people, they get better because of their immune system, which we're talking about here today. One of the most important unknowns is why some people's immune system is up to the task of clearing out the virus, while others seem to have an immune system that is sluggish or it overreacts, which then leads to death. So, how do we know for sure if a person is immune to COVID-19 once they've been infected? What percentage of the U.S. population will be immune after the first wave of infections has come and gone? Will immunity last over time, or does it fade? That's a big question. Those antibodies that are in your body, if you've had it and you've recovered from it, how long do those long-lasting antibodies stay in your body? That's the unknown right now. And then, can a vaccine provide immunity and stop the pandemic? Which I know that's the mainstream narrative. Oh, we're 18 months away from a vaccine and we all need to get vaccinated and that will end it and we can all go out and hug and kiss and have a good time. That's what they want us to believe. It's helpful in thinking through all of these unanswered questions to understand how your immune system works, collectively as everybody, and then individually in you, the person. How immunity testing works, how immunity to similar viruses can change over time. It's also comforting to know that if you get COVID-19, your body is going to try very, very hard to save your life. And if it doesn't, it could be because it tried too hard. And they're going to talk about that here in a second as well. So I thought this was a good little primer, you guys. Most people don't know how the human body works. And if they get disease and things like viruses, they don't know how the immune system is actually fighting off a virus. So I would dare say most of you watching me right now, you don't know. You just know that you have an immune system and that you hope it's up for the task of fighting COVID-19, right? We just hope. Well, let's see what actually happens. So in this guide to the immune system, we'll look at antibodies, serological tests, reinfection, and then immunological memory. All of it will be explained in clear language. Again, this is from Vox.com, very well written article. Your immune system is like a beautifully complex orchestra. It plays two movements. The first one to know about the immune system is that it is not simple. Not at all. A huge array of cells and chemicals your body produces work in concert to clear any foreign invader from your body. There's a lot of elegance to the whole system, says Akiko Iwasaki, an immunologist at Yale School of Medicine. It's like a orchestra. All of these cells and chemicals have to work in concert together. Each have a different part to play in order to defeat the virus once it's in your body. A viral infection begins when a virus enters the cell of your body, and in the case of COVID-19, it is transmitted mostly by respiratory drops. So if you get a little drop of spit put in your nose, your mouth, your eyes, you got it. Maybe that takes place somewhere in the lining of your nose, in the area of your lungs, directly in contact with the air that you inhale. So what happens then is the virus attaches to a cell via a protein on the cell surface called ACE2. Remember yesterday we were talking about insulin resistance and how when you have insulin resistance, your susceptibility to ACE2 being weakened is higher, which is why we were talking about boosting your metabolic health is going to help improve the strength of that ACE2. This is the breakdown. A lot of people with this COVID-19, there is where the cascade of inflammation starts. So the protein on the cell surface called ACE2, and then it just lets itself in. So COVID-19 takes a surfing ride right there on ACE2. There is where the havoc begins to happen. The virus hijacks the cell's machinery and starts replicating itself. So it's basically the worst case. If you remember the 1980s movie Gremlins, don't get them wet. There is where COVID-19 gets wet. And it replicates and replicates and replicates many times over. Those copies all break out of the cell and then spread all over your body. The copies enter more of your cells, make more copies, so forth and so on. This is going viral in the literal sense. So think about like when something goes viral online, it means a whole lot of people are watching it all at the same time. If it's a video, or an image gets posted and reposted and retweeted and blah, blah, blah. That's viral. Well, in the body, all this replication just explodes all through your body. And it's a process your body works furiously to stop. So the body recognizes when something is awry. Whoa, what is all this new stuff? And it goes to attack. If the immune system is an orchestra in concert, it can be broken down into two specific movements. First, you have the opening, the innate immune response. This is your base level protection that you have to defend against infections, even those your body has seen before. Iwasaki explains that every single cell of your body has something of its own immune system in miniature. Imagine that. There are so many cells in your body, the human body, tons, millions of cells, and every one of them has their own individual innate immune system. That's pretty fascinating. So your cells have a mechanism to detect when a virus infection enters the body. Every cell is looking out for telltale genetic signs of viral replication. So they know when they sense that something is awry in the body, go right away, because something bad is about to happen if they don't go into action. Once that is found, your cells start secreting cytokines, signaling molecules, to tell the neighboring cells that there's a viral infection. So it's like you see the neighbor's house on fire. We all taking our hose and we're trying to spray it out. We're yelling to all the other neighbors, bring the water hose quick, and let's try to help put out the neighbor's house that's on fire. And that's what the cells are doing. They're talking to each other, saying, hey guys, we got a problem here. We got to get this bully out of our neighborhood, or this fire could spread to the whole neighborhood. It will signal that cell to make a lot of antiviral proteins. Every part of the viral life cycle is targeted by hundreds of genes that are induced by this. There's a lot of elegance to this whole system. It's like an orchestra. So the innate immune response will then try to stop the virus in its tracks there. But it can fail, as we know. Viruses have evolved ways to counter this initial response. So not only are the cells working to beat the virus, but the virus knows the cells are coming for them, and they're sending this immune response, and they have ways to counter it. The viruses might encode proteins that degrade some of the signaling molecules. Even though we have this amazing system, viruses will try to circumvent it. I mean, think about this. This is like the sneakiest cops and robbers story you've ever heard. Like, did you know that the body and viruses kind of had this tit for tat? Like, I imagine the Beat It from 1980s Michael Jackson, where they were like fighting each other, but they were doing it in like this perfect harmony. And that's kind of what's going on between the cells that are trying to save you from a viral infection, and then the virus trying to dig deeper and get even further into your body. So if the innate immune system can't get rid of the infection, the second movement in this orchestration will begin. It's called the adaptive immune system. It has a vast array of instruments, each of them tuned to a specific task in your body. All right, so there are the dendritic cells, which act as messengers from the innate immune system. They tell the adaptive immune system which viral proteins it should seek out and destroy. In other words, it looks for the biggest bully amongst all of them. Let's get the big boy, and maybe the rest of them will cower in fear and run away. These are killer T cells, which hunt down and kill cells that have been infected. There are also helper T cells, which stimulate killer T cells and recruit yet another class of cells called macrophages to gobble up all the infected cells. They also stimulate B cells, which this brings this whole concert to a big crescendo. So a human T cell, some T cells hunt down and destroy infected cells. Other T cells are helpers, rallying other components of the immune system, like we just talked about, to the infection. So B cells, that might even be beta cells, are critically important because they produce the antibodies. Here's the key, guys. We want to see, is your body fighting off whatever the infection is? And of course, we're applying this to COVID-19, but it's really anything that would enter the body. These are little proteins that bind specifically to a distinct part of a virus or a pathogen and make it unable to hijack your cells. Antibodies can also identify invaders for other immune cells to destroy, and they can mark infected cells for destruction long before a virus will burst out. After an infection starts to fade, the antibodies that linger can prevent the same virus from rising again. But this process will take time. So the neat Menarchery, an immunologist who studies coronaviruses at the University of Texas Medical Branch. Innate says, when you first get infected with SARS-CoV-2, it usually takes anywhere from 10 to 14 days for your body to make antibodies that would be effective enough to kill it off. That immunity actually peaks between 4 to 8 weeks after you've been infected. The antibodies are really powerful at that point. So let's say you get COVID-19, and let's say you have mild symptoms and your body recovers. You're not fully immune to it until about 4 to 8 weeks is what they're saying. And at the end of that period is when you are at the strongest, because those antibodies, the thing I went to go get tested last week, are in full force. They're almost saying, bring it to COVID-19 if it tries to enter your body again. It takes a long time because an antibody has to be unique for the specific virus that it's trying to protect against. Part of the challenge with COVID-19 is not only, it's not just one virus anymore. We have seen it mutate into about 8 or 9, and it's probably more than that now, but as of the last time I checked, about 8 or 9 different mutations. And so who's to say you get infected with it now and then you build up those antibodies, but then it comes back again in the summer in a different form. Yes, it's still COVID-19, but it's a different form, and your antibodies aren't sufficient to fight it off. That's what the researchers right now and all the people kind of looking at this are saying, we don't know. That's the thing. It takes a while and some trial and error to both build an antibody that can perfectly bind to the contours of the virus and then to produce millions of copies of that antibody. Because remember, once COVID-19 or whatever viral infection gets in your body, it's replicating and it's replicating and it's replicating at very fast rates. And so you don't need a few little antibodies, you need them all over your body. The process is not simple, but you can be in awe of it, like you can be in awe of a timepiece constructed from hundreds of delicately selected parts. So Iwasaki says, I teach an entire semester course just on this process. This is the delicate process that a vaccine is trying to replicate artificially. So yeah, so they're working on a vaccine for COVID-19, and literally they're trying to create in a lab what this antibody process that your immune system is doing. They're trying to be able to have people get injected with this, and hopefully, I guess once it's injected into them, their body takes over from there and starts to replicate it and make these antibodies. So that's the theory right now. This antibody construction process can backfire, however, listen to this. In some cases, antibodies bind to the virus, and instead of blocking the virus, they actually take it right up into your white blood cells. Those white blood cells then will go haywire, promoting molecules called cytokines. Ordinarily, these chemicals promote inflammation throughout the body. Inflammation is something that will make you feel sick, as you guys well know, but it also helps us to survive. People often think of swelling when they think of inflammation. Swelling occurs because cells from your immune system are rushing to the site of the infection. These immune cells have to get out of your blood vessels in order to corral the infection. It's a lovely process called rolling extravasation. Your tissue gets inflamed because the balance of fluid is being changed in it. But sometimes so many cytokines are released that they trigger white blood cells to turn against healthy cells. You know what that's called, right? That's called autoimmune. And so when the body attacks itself, it thinks itself is a foreign invader, autoimmunity happens. So people know the autoimmune condition of the thyroid is Hashimoto's. People know the autoimmune condition where the body attacks, say, the pancreas. That's type 1 diabetes. We have so many autoimmune conditions, and that ultimately makes the disease as bad as it can be. It's unclear why this cytokine storm, which is kind of the terminology used for when COVID-19 comes in, it creates this storm of inflammation in your body. That's why people start to get sick so fast. That's why they have all of this depressed immune system that has all these symptoms that you've been hearing people talk about. It might impact some people severely, and then others not so much. Though there are indications that age is a factor, as are underlying conditions like, and they put it here, high blood pressure and diabetes. I would say insulin resistance probably is the key. Researchers also are now looking for genetic clues to see who is at most risk genetically. Thankfully, though, doctors do have insights in how to treat this overreaction. This whole orchestra ends when the immune system neutralizes all the virus in the body. That doesn't always mean the virus is completely gone and purged. Many viruses can linger in a latent state in the body without reproducing or causing symptoms. These latent viruses can flare up when the immune system becomes weak, causing opportunistic infection. So think about that. Think about those of you that are asymptomatic of COVID-19 and you've been exposed to it. There might be some latent remnants of it still in your body, so that when you do get to a point in your life where your immune system gets compromised, it's sitting there and it could cause problems later. At the same time, you will have some antibodies in your blood that could help fight it off. But for reasons scientists don't quite understand, for some infections, and notably in other types of coronavirus infections, antibody levels can wane after a few years. So how do we know if you're immune to this? That's the million-dollar question. There are 2 specific tests to find out if you're immune to COVID-19 and other kinds of viruses. Tests. But that's the problem. We don't have availability of tests right now, so that's the challenge. I literally Googled COVID-19 antibody test, Spartanburg, South Carolina, last week. And I found that clinic, like I said, about 2 miles from here at my house. And they tested, it was $70. I've had several people from California. They found the same clinic that I went to, Arc Point Clinic, and they're a lab. And in California, it's almost $300 for the exact same test. So in particular, blood tests, also known as immunity tests or serological tests, can reveal who has antibodies to the virus. Deploying these tests can help answer a lot of questions. Most basically, it can help a person know if they've had COVID-19. That test was so stupid easy that I took. Literally, it's like pricking your finger for a blood sugar or blood ketone test. You put it into the little machine and you let it sit there for 12 minutes, and 12 minutes later, it gives you the readout. They could send those tests through the mail and let everybody test this at home. It would be so super stupid easy to do. But unfortunately, a lot of the medical doctors that I've talked to that are treating patients with COVID-19, several of them on the front lines from the keto community, the medical community, they say a lot of the tests that they've got have been duds, like they're not reliable. You need to find one with a 95 percentile sensitivity. If it's not 95%, it's not going to give you an accurate result. Most of the ones these doctors have tried to get have been the 95, but sometimes they'll get a 30%. Well, 30% doesn't help you at all. You need the 95%. So, on a larger scale, if deployed in well-designed studies, serological tests could reveal the complete picture of this pandemic. They can help scientists answer very basic questions, such as how many people infected with the disease who actually die. Right now, they're telling us the death rate is somewhere around 3%-ish, 3 or 4%. Is that the real death rate? A lot of people are saying, well, without having accurate numbers of who all has COVID-19, you can't get an accurate number on what the death rate is. What percentage of the population has been infected? Again, we don't know because they've made us stay holed up in our houses, and there's a whole lot of people that are asymptomatic. So unless you test to see who has had it or does have it, there's no way of knowing. Who and how many may have spread it without knowing it? And that's a $1 million question too. That's why we're all stuck in our houses on lockdown right now, is because they don't know who has it. And thus, if we don't know who has it, we're going to lock you down until the rates come down enough that we can get a handle on this. So this article says serological tests could also potentially allow people who have immunity to return to work. So think about that. You get this test. It shows that you've got the COVID-19 antibodies present. It means your immune system successfully fought it off. Why can't you go back to work? You've got the antibodies in place. Why do you need to continue to hole yourself up in your house? Also, it's a huge boost to the frontline health workers who may have been exposed to the virus but desperately are needed back in action. So think about whenever a COVID-19 outbreak happens in a hospital setting, and I've got a friend right now who is going through that. She is in the quarantine period of 14 days because one of her coworkers got COVID-19, and so they're making everybody stay home who was exposed to this employee just as a precaution. Just finding the antibodies isn't always enough, though. Scientists also need to do some additional tests to make sure those antibodies are potent enough. There are two main types of antibodies. The first just looks for the antibodies and can be completed in a few hours. This is called the Elisa Test, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, and it doesn't provide the most complete picture of immunity. The second test is much more involved and much rarer. It's called a serum neutralization test. It can take a few days to get it processed. It not only looks for antibodies, it then exposes those antibodies to a virus in a cell culture to see how effective the antibodies are at stopping the virus. Now that would be cool to see under a microscope, watching these antibodies do what antibodies are supposed to do, and that is fight off a virus. Ideally, scientists will correlate the two tests and then figure out which concentrations of antibodies confer the highest level of immunity. This work is ongoing. It's not known what levels of antibodies are needed in order to have lasting protective immunity. These tests are useful, but they don't really answer everything. As noted earlier, it takes days, if not weeks, for the body to produce adequate antibodies. So a negative antibody test doesn't mean the virus isn't present. And since antibodies are produced during an infection and linger after it's cleared out of the body, a positive antibody test doesn't mean the virus is no longer active in your body. Confirming whether someone can still spread COVID-19 requires a separate genetic test, like an RT-PCR test. It detects the active virus. Is this fascinating, guys? Like, I read this article and went, I have to share this on Jimmy Rants. So your levels of antibody can wane over time, but it doesn't mean you're completely defenseless. So even if people become immune, one thing we don't know about this is how long it lasts. How long does the immunity last? And that's unfortunately not something we can determine until we wait months or years in the future and then test again to see if the antibodies are still there. So for reasons scientists don't quite understand, for some infections, your immunity will never wane. Think about immunity to smallpox. You are immune for life. Antibodies that protect against smallpox have been found as long as 88 years later. Less reassuring here is that scientists have observed antibody levels to other coronaviruses. They will wane over a period of years. A few weeks after an infection, antibody levels will be at their highest. But a year from now, that number is likely going to be a little bit lower. And 5 years from now, it's likely to be potentially a lot lower. And we don't know the factors that make that change happen. However, if you lose antibodies, it doesn't mean you are again susceptible completely to getting a virus. See, none of this is simple, they say in the article. There have been a few experiments where volunteers were willingly exposed to a coronavirus strain that produces the common cold. These studies show it's common for the antibodies to these other coronavirus strains to decline after a year or so. So the majority of people that don't have serum neutralizing antibodies, they get infected again, but they didn't get sick. You couldn't do this type of test for COVID-19 because it's too dangerous with all the known risks associated with it. So there have been reports of a few patients in China who had mild symptoms of COVID-19 who did not have detectable neutralizing antibodies after recovery, though they did have another form of antibody that binds to the virus. It's unclear whether they have protective immunity. Yes, there is more than one type of antibody and they do different things because, again, none of this is simple. Luckily, even if your antibodies against coronavirus decline, your body does have a backup plan. So certain types of beta cells become memory beta cells. These save the instructions for producing an antibody. In other words, it'll remember when COVID-19 came in your body, and even if your antibodies start to wane, when COVID-19 tries to come back in again, these memory beta cells kick in. They hide out in your spleen, in your lymph nodes, and perhaps at the original site of the infection. So wherever that first line of defense came to kick in to fight this thing, that's where there could be a concentration of the memory beta cells as well. And they're waiting for the signal to start producing the antibodies again. So these memory beta cells are in reserve. Instead of waiting 2 weeks or more to get the production going, you probably have to only wait 2 to 3 days. So that means, yes, you can get infected again, but you may not know you're sick. And if you do get sick, it'll be very minor. Generally, he says, the more severe your infection, the more antibodies your immune system will produce, and the longer they'll stay in your bloodstream post-infection. So he says there is some concern that if you have a mild infection, that your level of protection may not last as long. I wonder what it means to the people who get no symptoms at all. Are the antibodies potent enough that if you got hit again? I don't know. It doesn't say that here. You may have seen some reports of people testing positive a second time for COVID-19 after they recovered. The experts that we spoke to for this story say these reports are likely due to a flaw in testing. I think the risk of being infected more than once with COVID-19 is nil, says Gregory Gray, an infectious disease epidemiologist at Duke University. This may be because as you progress in your illness, the testing for COVID-19 becomes a lot more inconsistent. Often at the time that virus diseases present themselves, it's fairly far into the replication of the virus in that person. Many symptoms of virus disease actually are manifestations of the immune response to the disease. Often things are starting to get better at the time you're starting to figure out that someone has a viral infection. At least in the short term, it's probably more the case that people who tested positive after recovering haven't completely cleared the virus from their system, or that a prior negative test was inaccurate. In other words, testing is all that matters here. The original test might not have shown you had coronavirus even though you had symptoms. And we know from the swab thing, I was talking about this recently in a Jimmy Rants, there's a huge negative, false negatives that are happening from that because people don't go deep enough with the swab. And then what we were talking about earlier in this story, the virus can hang out in your body. So maybe it never fully left the body and this isn't a reinfection. It's the same one, it just never fully cleared the body. Over the long term, the immune system itself becomes less effective as you get older. And as people age, they can acquire more chronic illnesses that hamper the response to a virus, even if it's one the immune system recognizes. It could be years, though, before scientists understand what aging means for immunity to COVID-19, which that's an interesting point. If you've been exposed to COVID-19 and it is hanging out dormant in your body and you start getting older and older, are we going to start seeing people having ramifications of this down the road as their immune system gets weakened, as they get older? That'll be definitely something to look out for. I'm sure researchers are already going to try to follow certain people who've been exposed to COVID-19 to see what happens in their health and if they have a reoccurrence of this because that virus is hanging out dormant in their body. So they do ask the question, why won't widespread serology testing save us? So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is now conducting these surveys, the serological surveys for COVID-19 antibodies in several places in the US. It's an attempt to figure out who was previously infected, particularly if they never had any symptoms at all. A survey like this could actually show the background rate of infection and answer critical questions like what portion of the people have been infected without having any symptoms at all, and where the virus has spread to in the population, quantify the overall rates of severe complications. Knowing all of these variables can help health officials better target their intervention. Many people who've been infected also want to know if they are immune so they can get out of lockdown. That's what all of us want to know. Countries like Germany are even considering granting immunity passports so that individuals can get back to work. Such testing, though, could make a difference in a handful of cases, like for doctors and nurses, so they could get back to action where they're desperately needed. But serological testing is unlikely to be a wholesale solution for us to reopen our economy. Again, scientists are still uncertain about the robustness and duration of immunity that a COVID-19 infection confers. So a positive antibody test at this point doesn't guarantee that one can safely get out of social distancing measures. If immunity does fade after a year or two, the same person could be vulnerable to reinfection. So what are they going to do? They're going to keep us locked up for a year or two? This is strange, you guys. Meanwhile, to reopen schools, shops, and offices across the board, large numbers of people would have to have immunity. Without a vaccine, that would mean the virus would have to infect vast swaths of the population, in the process sending thousands to the hospital and to their death likely. That is exactly what measures like lockdowns and social distancing are trying to avoid. While this outbreak has been ghastly, it has not been so bad as to bring about herd immunity in any quick time frame. There have been some imperfect serological studies that suggest the virus has infected more people than we've estimated, but even if that's true, the studies don't mean we're anywhere close to having herd immunity. So it's likely that immunity can be a benchmark for when it's okay to go back to normal across the population. Even in your individual cases, it requires careful considerations of risks. So they're saying COVID-19 exposure, getting infected with it, is not the only way to become immune to the virus. For those who have not had it yet, the main form of protection right now is to prevent it. But there are several options scientists are studying that could help those who were never infected to fend off the illness. Chief among them is a vaccine. They've been pushing that really hard. A vaccine will take various forms: a weak version of the virus, small piece of virus or genetic material, to prompt your immune system to manufacture the antibodies, which we talked about earlier. Developing a vaccine would be ideal to end this pandemic, since it's a form of prevention and it's not as costly as lockdowns, quarantines, and social distancing. But it is time consuming. Many say it's going to be at least a year to develop a vaccine. But even the vaccines pose risks, and a lot of the anti-vaccine people out there are like, no way, Jose, am I ever taking a vaccine? So you've got that as well. A small number of people can have dangerous effects, adverse effects to a vaccine. Basically, you're giving a person a little bit of this very thing we've been trying to socially distance them from. And some people's immune systems don't respond well, and so they have adverse reactions. In rare cases, vaccines can cause a phenomenon called immune enhancement, where the vaccine makes the recipient's immune system overreact to it, leading to much more serious, severe disease than those who were unvaccinated. Though the risks are small, vaccines have been delivered to millions of people. That's why we need a vaccine. So another tactic is using convalescent plasma. The idea is to harvest the liquid part of the blood, including proteins used for clotting, from people who have survived COVID-19. In other words, you're trying to extract some of the antibody properties. This plasma has antibodies to the virus, so scientists are seeing whether it can help people with active infections get better. Researchers are also studying whether convalescent plasma can also be used as a prophylactic in order to prevent COVID-19. So not only to treat people who have it, but can those of us who are healthy and haven't been exposed to this yet, can you be injected with those antibodies, and then thus you are immune? Companies are developing antibodies to this using mice genetically engineered to have human immune systems. These antibodies can also be used to treat or prevent the disease, but antibody transfusions, whether they come from COVID-19 survivors or were in a lab, only confer protection against the virus for just a few months. I don't want to keep reading. This is an extremely long story. The main thing is none of this is simple. None of this is easy. There's people that say, oh, we need to get out of lockdown. There's no harm anymore. I haven't gotten sick. Therefore, we need to all be out. And so we need to realize how the immune system is responding. And the problem is we don't know why some people's immune system responds remarkably well and others don't. Now, we talked, like I said yesterday, about the insulin resistance connection and how that ACE2 pathway is key in this. But let's not pretend like that we can just go willy-nilly with this. Like, we really need to try to get a hold on this. One advantage scientists have in the COVID-19 pandemic is that they didn't have it in prior outbreaks, is an unparalleled level of information sharing among researchers. So researchers are regularly posting all of their preliminary findings online for the whole world to see, working across all borders, collaborating on an unprecedented scale. That's really big, because before this, researchers are very protective of their own research, and they don't want other people knowing what they're researching, but they seem to be talking to each other. So this has led to unknowns becoming known a whole lot faster. The disease is continuing to spread. The pandemic response measures can't continue forever, so we need to have some difficult choices ahead. All right, so that was a mouthful of incredible information. I hope you learned some things about how your immune system does work to attack the virus like COVID-19. It is incredible because people think, oh, I get it. I develop antibodies. I try to get it again. It won't happen because the antibodies are going to save me. And it's a little more nuanced than that. And I think we need to be very careful, and we need to trust these immunologists. I mean, we've got some that are out there kind of spouting what they want us to hear, but listen across the board to many voices. Like, don't just get the official voices and just think that that's everything. There's so many people sharing really good information out there right now. It behooves us as lay people to really educate ourselves and see what the real deal is about this. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Going to go to Instagram Live first. I'll come over to Facebook Live here in just a minute. So thank you guys for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com, as always, is how you access the past episodes of this here show. Sam said, I would be curious to see a study done of how many of us who eat low-carb keto and carnivore get better quicker than anybody else because we're healthier. I'm just curious. Yeah, they're doing a lot of the analysis of the data of the people who are getting the worst symptoms and not doing well with this. They're looking at that, and they've seen that those people who get the worst from it, they always kind of blame the obesity, but I think the obesity is just a symptom of what's really happening. It's the people that have insulin resistance, higher blood sugar, higher insulin levels, higher inflammation levels, lower immunity overall, and other comorbidities of chronic diseases. Those are the people that tend to have the biggest issues. Well, when you eat keto and you eat carnivore and you eat real food, you tend to fix a lot of those things. So somebody can go keto now, and if they can keep from being exposed to COVID-19, within very quick amount of time, a lot of those things can get remarkably better, which is why we're promoting people to try to get healthier now. Stop eating the junk food. Don't put all that stuff in your mouth anymore. Start getting healthy. Kat says if you had asymptomatic case, probably second time around would be the same, and maybe antibody production doesn't matter. Many blind spots in how our immune system works. That is true. All right, thank you, Instagram Live. Let's see what my guys over here and gals on Facebook Live have to say. Thank you guys for being here. Welcome in. Let me go back to the top here, see what you guys have to say about this very fascinating topic. Hello, hello. Jessica says, good information. Thank you, Jessica. I read that, and it definitely was written for a layperson audience to understand very complex science. So I liked it, and I appreciated their attempt to try to reach the lay people. Judy says, if the virus mutates, does it get weaker? Not always. Sometimes when the virus has mutated, it changes and gets stronger. So that's the problem here. We don't know what is happening with it once it starts to mutate. Angela says, I'm anti-vaccine. There's more people having adverse reactions than are reported. Yeah, I know all about the anti-vaccine movement. Of course, anti-vacciners are often ridiculed and mocked, but I do hear their concerns, and I think we need to take that under serious consideration. It's going to be interesting once they create a vaccine for COVID-19. Are they going to force and make it mandatory that everybody gets vaccinated? If that happens, they're going to have a battle on their hands, because there are some people that are adamant they will never, ever, ever take a vaccine. So I can't see that happening. My adult children aren't vaccinated and they're much healthier than their peers. Again, you have a little bit of the thing you're trying to vaccinate from put into your blood system. And some people don't respond well to that. Staying at home interrupts herd immunity. Wearing masks interrupts the body's immunity building. Ask an immunologist that isn't paid by a government entity. It's Immunology 101. At-risk groups should be the ones staying at home. I agree. My mom is one of those at risk, by the way. She has this condition. It's an autoimmune disease called myasthenia gravis. And she's on a bunch of medications because of that, steroids included. And so, yeah, I'm constantly telling Mom, take vitamin C, take vitamin D, and I'm kind of giving her some things, and she's staying at home. My sister Beverly is buying her groceries and bringing them to her, cleaning off everything as she puts things away and stays 25 feet away. So they're doing all the things, but she's one that needs to stay in, whereas others of us that are pretty healthy, that's to be determined when we can get back out there. All right, thank you, Facebook Live. Let's go back to Instagram, see if there's any final thoughts before we get out of here. Why somebody can eat their cake every day and have no insulin resistance, no metabolic damage, and some of us have to forget about tomatoes. Isn't that really cool? Or not cool? It's ironic, I suppose, is the word. Genetic game is the strongest. Yeah, I know I'm fighting some major genes from my genetic pool. I have a strong history of heart disease in my family, and so I am expressing an epigenetic expression of that right now, because by my age, most of the men in my family have had a heart attack. And knock on wood, Jimmy Moore has not, because of the way I eat. All right, guys, so I hope you enjoyed that here today, and that's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. Beth says, my concern is not with a little bit of whatever they're injecting you with, it's a little bit of all the other stuff they're injecting with it. Well, yeah, what else are they putting in there? Exactly, Beth. We don't know. That's the problem. We're just told, take the vaccine. So JimmyRants.com is the website. As always, join in on the fun. We have a lot of fun over here on Instagram, so go follow me there at Livin' Low Carb Man, LivinLowCarbMan. We also simulcast over on my Facebook page, so thank you guys for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the past episodes, pop on over to JimmyRants.com. We got them all archived right there for you to see, and you can also see all the past episodes up on YouTube. Hello to all my YouTubers watching. Type in the keyword Jimmy Rants and you will find the show. So guys, that's it for now. We'll be back again tomorrow with more Jimmy Rants.